Good evening, Hilde.
Good evening, Alexander. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Hilde. I
Okay.
am so excited to have you as the first expert on the spot on Senior Boulevard TV.
I'm honored.
Yeah, I really look forward to this conversation. We have many things to talk about. So I feel very privileged to do the first interview with a person with the profile that you have. Perhaps you could start by doing an introduction on your activities and so forth, and then we kick it off. What do you think?
Okay, perfect. So, as you know, I started my professional career in the financial sector, and more than 10 years later, in the year 2000, I landed in the sector of elderly care by coincidence. And the mayor of the city where I lived in Belgium was asking at that time to make a business plan for an elderly care facility, which was almost bankrupt. And so I did. And afterwards, they asked me to set up the operations of that elderly care facility because they couldn't find someone. And again, I accepted. And then I realized that there was a lack of financial knowledge and economic skills in this sector. Because running an elderly care facility, as you know, Alexander, it's like running a company with all the consequences.
Okay, but you mean professional or organization skills, perhaps sustainability, efficiency?
Yes, indeed. That's exactly what was lacking in that sector. And it should be introduced in order to keep it pleasant for the elderly, but at the same time, keep it financiable for the entire sector.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. So this is why my passion for this sector started growing, and I made a decision to switch completely from the financial sector to the social sector to set up new, future-proofed elderly care facilities. And it felt really good to me. Of course, 20 years ago, this sector was not really sexy, so my choice was not evident at that time, as you know.
Yeah, of course, I can imagine. As a youngster being associated with being the expert of the seniors, that must have created a lot of perhaps even misunderstandings and incomprehensions, actually, as a former dynamic banker.
Yes, indeed. We were developing and offering a lot of products and services to many segments. But as you know, there was no attention towards seniors because it was, again, not sexy. And social engagement as well as economic sustainability were not combined. And I didn't agree with that. And I wanted to exactly change that.
Mhm.
And maybe you can say that from that perspective, I wanted to be a pioneer. And this was my conviction to move forward a society.
Yeah.
But today it's completely different, and I'm glad I went for it.
Yeah. No, I fully agree, and even I think even the social sector is even more in need of that.
Yes.
No, thanks for that. You're also one of the founding partners of Lindbergh Group. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yes, indeed. Lindbergh is focused on theoretical and practical experiences in setting up elderly care facilities. So we execute every step, every single step you need from A till Z to realize a successful elderly care project. I think of market surveys, drafting feasibility studies, making a business plan for the operational side as well as for the real estate, setting up the operations itself, and putting financial and legal structure on place. So currently, I'm also active abroad in different European countries to realize trend-setting care projects, especially for assisted living and service care residences.
So you are indeed the ideal expert to ask the question, how does the senior housing market currently look like?
As you know, Alexander, today in most of the European countries, there is a lack of qualitative elderly care housing. Most of the countries do not provide sufficient housing for their elderly in the phase before the nursing home, the place where they usually are going to die. And that's why assisted living, or call it service apartments as you wish, for elderly are starting to slowly emerge in the most of these countries. And so it is important that the city councils, wherever they are located, incorporate the senior needs, and this in the broad sense of the word, in their long-term senior housing development plans. And because today this is a very big need, and no, today there is a very big need for such an approach. And don't forget, older people are they're getting older, wealthier, and more vital. So our elderly people of today are doing well in more areas. Think they live longer and in a better health. They live also independently longer and they have their own house, and sometimes it's generally free of debts. And the majority of this target group has relatively large savings reserves, and they can spend it wherever they want. And they're also sportier, as you know, maybe or not. 1 on 6 of this elderly group between 65 and 75 years old now has a subscription to the gym or swimming pool or other sports providers. So they're really doing well.
Yeah. And I guess also when you mean wealthy, that's in the context of in comparison with previous generations.
Exactly what I mean, yes.
About these seniors, how do you think they perceive their role towards the next generations, especially in the context that we're slowly realizing that future generations to come might not have the same living standards as their parents, but at the same time we're all aware that there are unprecedented amounts of asset value that will be transferred to the next generations at this moment or in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Play a huge role, for instance, in creating that value for the next generations. And towards that, I mean, for instance, societal engagements in general, support to other generations, and of course, heritage, and also heritage in all different aspects. You can look at it from a cultural perspective, obviously financially as well, expertise. What's the perception in your opinion towards that?
Yes, these are indeed points that have to be considered and further researched. As a lot of values lies here, which is we already try to introduce in our concepts, which we are building in Belgium and abroad. And you see a home is much more than just a bunch of bricks. People live in these buildings and they interact with their outside environment. And depending where you are on what senior profile you represent, it means the delivery of an entirely different concept to answer the needs of the seniors, their direct entourage, and as well as the public authorities and service providers. So we take all of this into account when we design new concepts. But I agree, we are only at the beginning of this new revolution in being able to integrate even more of these needs. But it starts again with the bricks, and where these bricks are being built, responding, of course, to the senior profile. So also, in general, healthy living, good food, quality of life seems to be the new credo. So happy agents, sometimes it is the slogan, I can tell you.
And in that sense, what do you believe that the consequences does this have for this target group? And I mean specifically from an economic point of view.
Yes, there is currently serious attention being given to this target group. We seem to have finally seen the light from an economical point of view. The elderly are a promising and very interesting group to reach today from the economic side. Mm-hmm. We are not only asking whether and how, but also what we are going to do for this target group. Even young people today who have startup businesses tailor-made to the elderly, and they are appearing more and more. So it brings a lot of opportunities from an economical point of view. And also, working longer is often a privilege, but for others, it will become a necessity for financial reasons in the coming years. So we must be aware that there is maybe separation between those who are more wealthier, elderly people, and those who have less. But also people, they want to pay for the quality of life. Mm-hmm. As the baby boomers, as you know, they're getting older. I'm also one of them. They will do what they have been saying for years. They take matters into their own hands. And it's often said jokingly that even this target group goes to the doctor with a note from Mr. Google and says, okay, this is what I have. Doctor, can you please say it's true or not? So they are taking own initiative to search for information online. And at the same time, they organize additional services for their parents and also for themselves to maintain a good quality of life.
Yeah, I see. Do you also see the similar evolution happening towards senior housing? Are also changes noticeable there?
Yes, living at home longer has been propagated as an ideal for years. And it is the wish of many elderly older people, that's sure. But often because they simply don't know where they have to go or what options are being or can be offered to them. So many elderly people find that despite the residential care homes that have been built in recent years, there is nothing suitable for them. So, but living alone, on the other side, has also its downsides. Loneliness, it's one of them, and also insecurity. You may know that 40% of the elderly people living alone regularly feel unsafe, especially at home. And I have to think also the number of falls with unpleasant consequences is also increasing. So solutions are being searched for this.
I think you mean are being offered.
Yes, are being offered. Yeah.
And isn't the challenge to then select the best ones and integrate them into then this overall concept that you're talking about and responding then to the overall combined needs? Isn't that where the challenge lies?
Yes, indeed. That's where the challenge, but also the opportunities lie ahead for us of us. And prevention is one of these solutions, but we must be properly delivered. They must be properly delivered to elderly. There have been so many millions of euros invested in all kinds of technology, each independent from each other. And the question now is, who will provide the breakthrough with what and when? And there is a need for a large integrated information platform that can bundle all the best elements and the best solutions to common problems. That's what we need.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy that you say that, because that's exactly what we're trying to put together or incorporate together with the video platform. Obviously trying to address the challenge as a whole and the exchange on opportunities, and to be able to then afterwards accelerate this and to the different solutions, but also various countries. So
yes, indeed.
Thanks for confirming that. So
absolutely, I agree completely with you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Do you think that the current senior housing market meets the expectation of the future needs of the elderly? Do you think that?
No, Alexander, and that is exactly the problem. There is an absolutely need for adapted housing for seniors in Europe, but we must be well defined. A person of 55 years old has different requirements than somebody of 65 or even of 80 years old. And this housing must offer also create a home feeling to all these people, whatever which age they have. So this idea can certainly include communal living, where the home feeling is present, where people are not being patronized, where self-esteem is very important, and also where the context within the same age group are stimulated. An environment where residents feel, let's say, useful, and where self-deployment is also stimulated. And we may not forget that it has to be adapted to reduced mobility. A home where people can maintain contact with their children and grandchildren, and where the latter like to visit. If we want to be able to live independently for a longer time, architectural challenges will also arise. When building new senior houses, it is better to immediately take into account any care needs for a later date.
Yeah. And I also think that there are certainly different forms of inclusive living in that context, right?
Yeah, obviously, the aging population requires even more solidarity. When creating the concept for this new type of senior housing, it needs to either fit in the existing social and cultural model, or the model itself must be reconsidered. The society needs to adapt to the level of demographic distribution of older people, including the construction of inclusive neighborhoods. And we are going to evolve towards mixed housing, where young people and the elderly live together and render services to each other. For example, the elderly can cook or babysit for the children, while the young people go to the shop for their parents or do more physically demanding jobs. And that is why you are currently seeing more and more examples of multi-generational living that grows with the needs of the residents, regardless when they are young or old.
Yeah.
And a different form of adapted living for this elderly population that is started to appear today, this is called the assisted living apartment. And for example, in Belgium, already has a great deal of experience with the assisted living concept, and also adequate legislation is in place. Yeah. These assisted living apartments, clustered in groups most of the time, are adapted to growing with housing and the care needs of the aging seniors. So it isn't about one solution fits it all, forget it. It needs to be a mixed living community that caters for the particular needs of its residents and which makes this whole field interesting. And these inclusive and multi-generation neighborhoods, like you call it, have sufficient cultural infrastructure and everything is within reach, which can also minimize the risk of isolation, especially for the elderly people.
No, I think this is really fascinating, very, very interesting. Do you see already today an evolution in behavior and needs already over the last few years? Is this noticeable already, you think?
Of course, in the future, as you know, older people will be more often be highly educated, and they are more expected to have more computer and digital skills, and they will demand for it. So older people will find their way in the healthcare system themselves and also in the digital world to organize their own care themselves. And also, as you can see, older people are becoming more empowered because elderly of the future will show their need for support and are becoming increasingly more critical and demanding. And also the people themselves indicate what they want, and they no longer just accept what is offering to them. And older people will get used to having more control over their life. Their ideas of elderly care in the future will differ from those of today, and the elderly of the future will know and indicate what is important to them. So a conclusion that we can have is, it seems that there is more emphasis on quality of life, in resilience and in meaning of life. The elderly of the future will therefore have different expectations of care and support than the elderly of today. And also they will use new digital tools. But Alexander, we must not forget that still a lot of elderly people don't accept the new digital world. So together, and the operator, the government, and the care providers, also we need to take that into account and at the same time provide accommodating measures such as setting up building standards, provide information and education to stimulate the use of adapted digital services and care in the new senior housing.
And I can imagine that in this context, family and informal caregivers are very crucial in this. Yeah. No, very interesting. And do you notice that this is indeed currently happening already at this moment?
A lot of initiatives on the European continent are happening at local as well as regional level, but not enough integrated and easily accessible to all actors. I think about public, private, and seniors and their entourage. So that's what I'm excited. I'm very excited I can participate into your first expert interview, because I believe we all need this in the future. So that will be the challenge.
Very, very happy to have that confirmed.
Yes.
So it seems that there is a problem in the future then in providing them the necessary care in terms of resources to the elderly.
Yes, but one problem is there are less active population to care for the elderly. There are increasingly fewer working people who are contributing to the pension of more and more senior people. This is called the gray pressure, which will increase sharply. Just an example, as you know today, for 100 active workers, they have to take care of 32 elderly people today. If we take 2030, in 2030, the same 100 active workers will take care of 43 elderly care people. So, you know, that will be a problem. And on the other hand, there is also a greater shortage of healthcare professionals in the future. So a problem that healthcare sector has been struggling with a long time, and which is only likely to increase, is the staff shortage. So, and to compensate for this, they're searching today professionals abroad. And naturally, this also poses administrative and linguistic challenges. And a third thing is what we have to take into account is the number of potential informal caregivers is also decreasing. You need to know that the people between 50 and 75 years old, this is the group who often provides informal care to to the people they love, and for their parents and the parents-in-law. And this group will become self-reliant in the future. So this is a relative vulnerable group of caregivers, and some of them also have to deal with the health issues themselves. So the problem is only getting worse in the future.
And do you then also think that the nature of care should change?
Yes, it should change definitely. The healthcare profession will change. More mobile and flexible healthcare will be offered more remotely, and the professionals will guide the patient and monitor the disease process via telecommunication and home visits. And as I said before, the focus will be more on resilience and self-management by the elderly care. And you have to think also about technology, which is considered a way to reduce the need for staff in healthcare, so making healthcare cheaper. But it is the extent to which people will be willing to embrace technology. And the idea that robots will take over interpersonal contacts is in particular provoking resistance. And this is something that we have to keep in mind. So the conclusion is, it is abundantly clear that extra initiatives to make the healthcare profession more attractive are desperately needed today.
I also have the feeling that we need to focus more on customization, actually, and then more need-based customization, and that's really how we have to look at it in the future. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do think so. Yes, I think so. On the one hand, there is a rise in chronic disease. This concerns, for example, the diseases such as arthrosis, diabetic dementia, and Alzheimer. But by 2030, there will be more elderly people with this physical disability. And for example, also they have a problem with vision and hearing problems, and maybe difficulties to move. And certainly among the group of 85 years old. But so the question is, how much extra care will be needed for this target group in the future? And on the other hand, diseases that used to be fatal will change into chronic. And so they will even be more demanding for care. So the mother and elderly will decide for themselves what this care will look like. and they will turn into, let's say, healthcare customers or consumers, and they will ask a tailor-made healthcare package. So customization is necessary for companies to survive in the future.
Yeah, would you have an example in mind towards that?
Yes, maybe I can give you one. If we can deal with the upcoming wave of dementia, some voices call for investment in pilot projects, such as wandering villages, where the people, which is adapted to the needs of the people and for dementia, and they can walk freely. But on the other hand, the other people says they prefer not to do so, since the science is advancing so rapidly, and maybe it make it possible to perhaps to have a cure in the short term. So at that time, they don't need this kind of villages anymore. So it's not so easy what we should do in the future.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are, are you also thinking about, or do you have a particular opinion about the link between the economic performance and the overall societal infrastructure, specifically applied to aging? I mean,
for this question, maybe Alexander, I can start with a general economic reflection. Firstly, there is a growing slowdown of the economy due to less productive people in society, and so production decreases as a result. And secondly, the population is growing older, so the pressure on the active workers force is increasing. So the only way to capitalize on this is to invest, I think, in our society, in the increase of productivity. So technology is certainly an important means to an end here. And with regard to new construction, it will become necessary for senior homes to be digitally adapted to the future, so that productivity can increase and thus reduce the pressure on the working population.
yeah.
And also renewal is also needed, both in the construction and in the concept of the building, as well as in the care models, because all buildings are being built for the next coming 50 years. And as an entrepreneur, we must ensure that profitability is okay. And fine-tuning this concept today is precisely the challenge. So we have to take this complexity into account. We need to involve family and neighbors and the loved ones. And in the past, the offer was limited and people accepted this situation, but it is not true anymore, as it is no longer sustainable for the future. So those who will deliver a future-proofed supply that is a demanding driven, they will win. And today there is too little awareness about all this, because many developers are holding on the old way and the old models. And also we have to repeat this exercise in every single country because of cultural differences.
Yeah, no problem.
Remember, the basic needs are the same everywhere. If it's Belgium, Switzerland, or wherever, only the way how we are going to deal with it will be different. So as a conclusion, the challenge will be to respond to the productivity pressure along with the huge post-corona debt. And we need to decrease the pressure on society by relieving the active population. And this will be possible to a certain degree by developing new elderly care housing and by creating new care models. Yeah. Additionally, the government also should take the necessary steps to ensure appropriate legislation and determine quality standard levels and information, which will allow technology and innovative care models in a more inclusive model of society.